Welcome everyone to Midnight Mysteries. This is episode 1 of a series that will cover dark, strange, and disturbing mysteries. I'm your host, Scenic Midnight. Let's dive in. Since this is episode 1, let's make it familiar. A classic haunting. But this isn't your ordinary bump in the night ghost story. This is the mystery of the Black Hope Curse. It's the early 1980s. Sam and Judith Hanley purchased their dream home in a new housing development in the Newport area of Huston, Texas. The neighborhood is filled with modern, upscale houses, perfectly cut lawns, and happy families. The American dream. But for Sam and Judith Hanley, this dream would quickly become a nightmare. The Hanleys' home was located on the far west side of the development, and after a year of settling in, Sam decided he wanted to install a pool in the backyard to beat the summer heat. But their home held a morbid secret. It wasn't long after Sam began to dig, a mysterious old man came to the Hanleys' home to warn them that if Sam continued to dig, he would unearth human remains. The man led Sam to a spot in the yard where the remains lie. He proceeded to mark the spots of the grave. The man explained that years before the houses were built in the area, it was a cemetery, and that he had buried the bodies that lie in his yard. After the man had left the Hanleys' home, Sam decided to ignore the man's warning and proceed to dig up the graves, a choice that would prove to be their undoing. Not long after digging, Sam hit something in the dirt. He got down and continued to dig by hand until he uncovered 2 skeletons, along with 2 pine boxes. Immediately, Sam picked up the phone and contacted the sheriff and county coroner. Once both arrived, the coroner conducted an official exhumation, a process of digging up a corpse. Most of the remains had turned to dust, but they were able to recover 25 bone fragments, some which disintegrated upon touch. But upon the fingers of one of the skeletons were 2 wedding bands, indicating the 2 bodies were married. Determined to identify the skeletons, the Hanleys contacted a resident who had lived in the area for a long time, whose name was Jasper Norton. Jasper told the Hanleys that during his teenage years he had dug several graves in the area and revealed that their home and many others were built upon an African American cemetery known as Black Hope. Many of the bodies buried were slaves. The last burial at Black Hope Cemetery was in 1939. And not long after, construction crews began to destroy any trace of the cemetery to start construction on the new housing development and disturbing the dead that rested there. Research on the 2 buried lovers continued, and what they uncovered were 2 names, Betty and Charlie Thompson, both born into slavery and freed during the Civil War. They both passed away during the 1930s. Guilt poured over Sam and Judith for disturbing the Thompsons' grave. Once they returned home, they reburied the 2 and prayed for their spirits to be at peace. But for the Hanleys, peace would not come, and the dead would not rest. One night shortly after the reburial, Judith noticed her clock glowing and sparking, but upon investigation, she saw that the clock was unplugged, an omen of worse things to come. On another night, when Sam was working the night shift, Judith was home alone. She decided to take a shower, and soon after getting out, she could hear the sliding glass door open and close. Assuming it was Sam, she went to greet him, but found no one. The next morning, Judith was getting dressed and went to get her red shoes from the closet, but saw that they were missing. Sam and Judith searched the house but found no signs of the red shoes. Shortly after, they discovered the shoes laying on the grave of Betty. Sam and Judith would learn that it was Betty's birthday. Perhaps the shoes were a gift from Charlie for his beloved. But Sam and Judith were not alone. A dozen neighbors would report strange happenings such as TVs, faucets, and lights turning on and off. Residents claimed to hear voices and see figures in their homes. The dead were awake. But these incidents would seem tame in comparison to the haunting of 2 neighbors, Ben and Jean Williams. Ben and Jean Williams moved into the same development around the same time as the Handleys, and shortly after, Jean began to notice her plants would keep dying and would report sinkholes forming in the shape of coffins near the flower beds. But once filled, they would reappear a short time after. Ben and Jean would notice a strange marking on the tree near the coffin-shaped sinkholes. Carved into the tree was an arrow pointed towards the ground, and beneath that were 2 horizontal slash marks. The Williams wanted answers. A longtime resident had told the Williams that he had marked the tree. He went on to explain why he had done that. It was to remember the graves where his sisters lie. Feeling guilty for desecrating their graves, Ben and Jean returned home, but the dead are not so forgiving. Soon after, the Williams would start experiencing supernatural activity. Shadows would slide along the walls of their home, followed by faint whispering and putrid smells. Carly, granddaughter of Ben and Jean, was living in the home at the time. She would report feeling bone-chilling pockets of ice-cold air, despite the blazing heat of the Texas summer. Here's a quote from Carly of the incident. "It would be very, very chilly, and you'd have this feeling of foreboding, or just, like something wasn't right. Anywhere in the house you'd have a feeling that you were not alone. Somebody was watching you. It terrified me to be in the house by myself. The toilets used to flush on their own. As the water went down, I could hear. It was almost like conversations. You could hear people murmuring to themselves. It was a presence, or spirit, or something there. Something that wanted to be heard, wanted me to know that it was there." Jean recalled another incident when Carly and her were about to lie down for a quick nap. They heard the back door open, then close, then the sound of footsteps walking towards them. But upon investigation, no one was found. Here's a quote from Jean on the reasoning behind the haunting. "I absolutely believe that all these things happened to us because we were on the graveyard, and that we were simply going to be tormented until we left." Jean decided enough was enough and tried to convince Ben to leave and end the torment. But Ben was stubborn and decided they should stay and fight. He would come to find the dead are even more stubborn than he. Shortly after, Ben would encounter something strange after coming home from the graveyard shift. 2 ghostly figures were standing in his home. He watched them head into the den and down the hall towards the bedroom. Upon entering the bedroom, Ben saw one of the figures standing over Jean. Not hesitating for fear of Jean's safety, he jumped under the bed, but the figure had vanished. The torment was far from over for the Williams. Over the course of a few months, 6 of the Williams' close relatives were diagnosed with cancer, 3 of which passed away. The Williams believed the cancer was caused by angry spirits, as revenge for disturbing their rest. Let's go back to Sam and Judith Handley for a moment. Sam and Judith decided to sue the developers for not disclosing with them that their home was built upon a cemetery. The Handleys seemed to be on solid legal ground, or so they thought. The court awarded the Handleys $142,400 for mental anguish. However, the judge reversed this and ruled the developer was not responsible. The Handleys were ordered to pay $50,000 in court fees. Emotionally and financially devastated, the Handleys filed for bankruptcy. The Williams followed with their own case against the developers, but the developers wanted proof the cemetery existed. Determined to win the case, Jean began to dig up the grave in her yard. But this just angered the spirits more, and Jean soon fell ill in the midst of digging. The Williams' daughter, Tina, mother of Carly, volunteered to finish digging up the grave. But half an hour into the dig, tragedy struck. Tina began to feel dizzy. She moved into the house and laid on the couch, but continued to feel worse. Ben decided he needed to call 911 and Tina was rushed to the hospital. She had suffered a massive heart attack during the dig, and sadly, passed away 2 days later at the age of 30. The Williams believe her death was caused by the spirits that tormented them. The Williams ended up losing their home and moving to Montana, and then back to another development in Texas. Ever since then, no more hauntings have occurred in the area. Perhaps the dead feel that justice was served. Nonetheless, no one can explain what happened to the two families. Many doubt it ever happened at all. But one thing that we can be certain is the mystery of the Black Hope curse is a terrifying one. This has been Midnight Mysteries with Scenic Midnight. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again.